Now I want a stage play.
Let's do it. Let's do it. We'll do a 2-man play.
If you guys like, follow, and leave a short review / comment, we become more powerful so that we can write a stage play and get Riot to produce it. We need that Tony. All right, get us that Tony. Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 46. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hetch.
And now, for the M. Night Shyamalan twist of our entire show, we are actually going back to Noxus.
Do you think the listeners are still here, like the Noxus fans?
No, they're all gone.
Episode 46.
They left after we did LeBlanc. Like,
they're like, they got in while they couldn't got out. They're like, listen, we got a little crumb. We're going to take this and leave.
It's like, all right, we're finally going to Noxus. And they started with LeBlanc. This will be fun. All right, let's talk about Zillion.
A month later.
Bye.
So we're back, as always, with another episode. Housekeeping up top. You can listen to us everywhere. Follow us on TikTok for clips. Yeah, we got one of those now.
Hello,
like
fellow youths.
Yeah, people are looking at it. People are liking it. People are leaving comments. Good stuff. Good stuff. TikTok is fun.
Yeah, and we're also on the other socials, so you can hit us up there too. Because again, we're on everything. Find
everything at podcastcor. That's COR. Emails if you want to, talk to us. Want us to say something on the show? Feel free. Leave a like, follow, and short review and comment anywhere. Even on YouTube, we're doing the YouTube Shorts now too. We're trying to cover all the bases so people can find us, and so you can find us everywhere, and so your friends can find us. Only if you tell them to become possessed by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Never mind, I'm out.
Never mind, I'm out. State of the game, a quick one. So. Obviously, we're at the beginning of this season with the new cards. We have a new event that started. It's been great so far. And I usually take the beginning of a patch to brew a little bit. So I took my Draven Riven, dusted it off, and I'm trying to, change it a bit to get it more in line with what Irelia and Azir demand. And it's working out. I want to play a bit more. I think I found the right spice to kind of keep the core of what the deck does well, while also being able to survive against that deck.
Yeah, everyone out to survive the Irelia train.
That's it.
Oh boy,
just survive. I'm still in the camp where that matchup, because it's coming, because it's so dominant, it's actually getting more fun to play against because the goal is to beat that deck, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're beating that deck and you're also doing well against the rest of the field, your deck's in a good place for the meta before Riot caves and does something.
I don't know if you got to see it, but Swim did a really big breakdown, like going over the League of Legends Reddit post addressing the state of Runeterra with Irelia, mm-hmm. and like breaking down like as far as the numbers reflecting the meta since Irelia has been added and the effect of Irelia Azir on ladder. So that it's much more intelligent than I could ever be. So it's I think he put it on his YouTube. It's definitely
give
worth
us the
a
cliff
watch.
Notes.
The cliff notes are that the numbers reflect that Irelia Azir are not dominating in win rate, but they are dominating in play rate. So the play rate is ridiculously high while the win rate's on the decline. And that's because everybody's just working to counter Irelia Azir, and that's it. And then his opinions were more along the lines of, something needs to be addressed just because the play rate's so high that it's meta warping. Yeah. Because everyone has to play to beat Irelia Azir.
It reminds me of a good example in the old Magic the Gathering days competitive when Delver came out. The Delver deck was something that it was the beginning of a format. Flip cards were introduced that had both sides, and this is when Innistrad came out. It was a big deal, big set, and the competitive side of the camp stumbled across this deck immediately, and it was so dominant that every tournament that year was just flooded with Delver, to the point where Legacy to this day is still flooded with Delver. And I won't go into the specifics of it, but it was meta warping, and it made a lot of conversations come up. It made, conversations go to the depth of what MTG was as a game at its core. And I think Irelia is the first instance of that, because the deck is so perfect. Like, every card in it is so perfect for each other that it takes away all creativity. So when you lose that ability to do anything to it, because any variant of the Azir Irelia deck you see that tries to go outside of what it's supposed to do immediately falls off the percentage. But
yeah, I will argue that it's not the first time for Runeterra. Twisted Fate with Go Hard, when Go Hard first came out. So the Twisted Fate Go Hard. And actually in that like that swim video, he actually puts up the numbers like side by side, and they're almost identical. Like, it's literally decimal points off percentage wise with their play rate and win rate, like compared. So it's
that's neat.
And so, like, the big thing that I agreed on that he said was that it's more of a problem that other play strategies are not at that level, because he also agreed
it's like
with
a
me.
new tier.
Yeah, he kind of agreed with me where, like, Irelia is not crazy. It's that the whole package of Irelia and Azir gets online so fast. So then, and it gets online so consistently. Like, there's not really a brick draw scenario like you see with, like, Vlad Braum, where then, we've talked about it before, where Vlad Braum, like, you get into that Scar Ground playing field, that's it. That's what you want every time, and majority of the time you never see it. Like, you've got to figure out a way to play without it. And Azir Irelia currently doesn't have to do that. And it was the same with Twisted Fate Go Hard before Go Hard got nerfed. And a lot of that package was that it was too consistent. It happened too much. And I would love to see some of these other strategies and synergies get a little bit more help. I don't want them to get buffed necessarily. I just want more card support. For me specifically, Mage Seekers. I want more Mage Seeker support, because I'm sick and tired of brewing Lux decks and still finding that Lux is not a good enough win condition at 5 mana. But that's a different show.
So what are you playing?
I was playing a Shurima Noxus kind of Overwhelm that I was tinkering around with myself. Again, Overwhelm, Azir Irelia. But this last week I took a pretty big seat away from playing on. Well, I don't play ladder too much, but I wasn't even playing normals too much. I was playing a lot in the lab, because I had forgotten that they added new difficulty tiers and new champions. So I've been bashing my head against my keyboard trying to make Talia work in the lab, and I hate it. It's like that Talia needs so much help in that lab. It's or I'm just stupid. I just, like, it's either one. I believe both.
All right, then with that, let's move into our main topic for this episode. It's been a long time coming. Nevermore. Once again, I'm showing our age. But we're starting off, like, this is an interesting episode for us, because Swain's been around forever. He's very pivotal to the story. A lot of the newer cards that have come out have made that even more so. So it was bound to happen. Our hand has been forced, pun intended. And here we are. God. So if a lot of these cards sound super familiar already, it's because they are. But they do play into the story. And the story, we've gotten bits and pieces over other episodes we'll tell you to go check out when those fit as we go through it. But this is, like, Noxus is important, and we'll stand by that as we move into these cards here. So what do we got for the spell?
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and just kick it off. I'm gonna kick it off right now and saying that most recently out of our episode list, Irelia and Swain, like there's a lot connecting those two, and that episode is still pretty fresh if you want to go give that a listen, because we're gonna mention it. It's big spoilers there. But the first card that we're gonna talk about is our spell that's gonna be Noxian Fervor. So Noxian Fervor, a now beloved staple of the Noxus aggressive strategies, and it is a 3-mana fast speed spell. Deal 3 to an ally to deal 3 to anything. And this is essentially, you're just kind of nuking one of your creatures to deal 3 to anything. And for the majority of the stuff, this is go face, baby. Like we're playing out our creatures, we're swinging in, and if something is getting blocked and dying, don't you worry. That 3 damage is going face.
There's more where that came from.
There's more where that came from. And that, like, the idea of dealing damage to your own board to affect the opponent's board or their life total is not inherently new to any card game. Like, this is a staple thing, and it was definitely a nice card to be added into Runeterra, but it got a lot of hate at the time it was added because that was when Pirate Burn really started to dominate things, and that was when we actually got to see a lot of nerfs to Bilgewater and a couple Noxus cards too. So it was kind of a mixed bag for Runeterra fans, but trust me, this is the kind of stuff we want in a card game. You got to have reach, otherwise everything is just going to be completely dominated by control, and then we would see nothing but karma on ladder, and every beta player can tell you, we don't want that. We got to keep that in check too.
Facts.
And of course, for the purpose of our show, the flavor text on this is just a direct quote from the man himself, Jericho Swain. And the quote is just very simply, "Sacrifices must be made." And if that does not define this card, I don't know what does. Right? It's going to define the story. It's going to define the card. It defines the play style. Chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss. And that takes us to the follower, which is equally as important, not equally as played, but in the decks where you need to finish people off in Noxus, you do see this a good bit, just because it's a very interesting well-made card for both the flavor and for the strategies that revolve around Noxus decks.
That's right, and that's going to be the Leviathan. So this is an 8-mana, 5/8 follower with Overwhelm. On the play, draw a copy of Swain, and at round start, deal 1 to the enemy Nexus 3 times. And this card mostly gets play, or you see most of the play with the Swain Yasuo decks, which you could argue is, technically more of a Yasuo deck. But in every Swain deck, this is pretty much going to be the top end because it's much more consistent as far as being able to get the other effects, as well as that you draw a copy of Swain. So if you're building a deck around Swain, you want to make sure that you can get to Swain, especially in some game states where you end up losing a copy. Getting that second one is great. So not to mention that with the unique spell of Swain, it's a lot more usable than some unique spells for champions. So getting Swain in hand is good, but Leviathan is beyond important because this is Swain's flagship. And not just an assigned thing. One of the things that doesn't get, it's kind of more of a sprinkling off to the side for his story, is that Swain is a very accomplished general up to, like, even before the point that we really get to dive into his story and what makes Swain the person that we know now. And his accomplished career was crowned with being rewarded the Leviathan by the Noxian Navy. So this wasn't just a ship that he's assigned to and he's going off to war. This was a gift. He now owns the ship, and it's because of his prowess within the ranks of the Noxian army and expanding the empire. And we can really see that with the flavor text, because as we know from Irelia's story, he lands in Irelia's neighborhood on that side of the island. And on the flavor text, what it says here is that when the Ionian locals saw it looming on the horizon, they thought it a monster. They were not far from the truth. The steel warship is terrifying, the greatest feat of Noxian naval engineering yet. So, the ship is literally the backdrop to Irelia's story. Like, not even just like the characters that are in it. Like, this is, if you were to build a stage and have a high school drama club perform this would be your backdrop. It's the Leviathan off in the horizon on the ocean.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor there, because I could see it. And now I want a stage play.
Let's do it. We'll do a 2-man play.
If you guys like, follow, and leave a short review / comment, we become more powerful so that we can write a stage play and get Riot to produce it. We need that Tony. All right, get us that Tony. So this takes us to the man himself and his story, Swain.
Oh my God.
And that one was for you, Hetch. And as we mentioned at the beginning and, a little bit throughout, is like the episodes you're going to want to check out that we've done in the past are the Riven episode, the LeBlanc episode, and the Irelia episode. These ones will give you a better, because we're not going to do all those episodes again in this one. It's just, come on, you don't have that time. We don't have that time. But there's sprinklings throughout of things you need that kind of fill in the gaps here to get us to this point. Because it is a very major point in Noxian history. So let's get into it.
Go listen to them, catch up, help us help you understand the story of Swain better.
Exactly. So one thing a lot of people wouldn't guess, Swain is born. That's it. That's the show.
And story's over. So fate of the game.
No, Swain is born in a rich family. And it's not just any rich family. It's a portion of the royal families that existed at the beginning of what we know as Noxus as a empire, right? As this is no longer a bunch of scattered villages that have been conquered. It's just an empire of Noxus now, and these royal families are established. And there's something that comes along with that, where Borum Darkwill, which we've talked about in most of our Noxus episodes because he's an important political figure here, is in league with those families, right? This is the ruling class of Noxus at this point, and they play a big role in Borum Darkwill coming to power. So part of this mentality with Borum in power is that the families portray this image that the heritage is the greatest strength of Noxus, right? And this kind of always tweaked with Swain. He didn't fall into that ideal. It didn't make sense to him for how he saw Noxus. And he also was aware of the Black Rose's influence over Borum. And when we say, aware of the Black Rose, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because it's not a real thing. Like, everyone thinks they have an idea of what the Black Rose is and what they're doing, but everybody's idea is different. Definitely check out the LeBlanc episode.
Yes,
for more on that.
With the LeBlanc episode, we really went into detail of how Borum, really knew how the Black Rose worked, to find out that he didn't. So everyone, they've got an idea, but it's what the Black Rose wants you to know. Exactly.
And at this point in time, like Hetch mentioned, Swain is an established person. Like, he's an established young man. He has, his fleet. And at this point, he digs deeper into the Black Rose's influence. And at the same time, Borum Darkwill is also kind of concerned about the Black Rose's involvement and wants help against that. So Swain takes it upon himself to execute any conspirators that he thinks are associated with the Black Rose, including his parents and the Pale Woman herself. And I say the Pale Woman because in LeBlanc's episode, we talk more about how loose that term is. But he executes enough people to get an award, like any good military. He's right. Like, all right, cool. You did a great feat. here you're awarded the Noxian army.
Yeah, like if this is a kind of niche game, if anyone's played it, but if you're familiar with the series Tropico,
Yeah.
and building your Caribbean dictatorship island, yeah, like you gotta serve those nationalists, you gotta execute any political enemies or send them off to the tobacco farms, and then that's how you make money to put in your private bank and not in the national treasury.
Yeah. And with this granting, this is where the epiphany starts to happen. So Swain has always been kind of wary of his family's views on the heritage and what Noxus stands for. But once he's granted this, he's given more free reign. He starts to understand more why that's not where the strength of the nation lives. And where he thinks it lives is in the ability for any Noxian to have any opportunity. Right, that's the key to what makes this nation great, is that there are no glass ceilings. No matter what your heritage is, no matter where you're from, what you do, who you are, you have the chance to be whatever you want to be. And it's during this campaign he gets sent to in the western border, which is in Shurima. So that kind of gives you an aspect of where it lies on the map. And we'll have an episode at some point where we'll talk about like landscape and where everything sits and how that plays down the road. We're not there yet. But Swain's, yes.
This is like, we're recording this in the United States. Like, geography is not in our schooling system anymore. So like, they're just going to have to figure it out. Like, west is kind of like on the left of my screen, right?
Yeah, yep. To your left. But this is where he starts to realize the faults in Borum's endeavors, right? Not only are his ideals grading on Swain, but it's like he's also doing these crazy things where he's being overzealous in how many fights he's going against, too many fronts. Come on. Art of War. We've talked about it before. You got to read it. You don't take on too many fights on too many fronts. And he's doing so with the goal of seeking out these magical relics in the places that they're invading, to seek immortality, which lines up with his current experience in politics and how he's slowly becoming more and more unhinged.
Yeah, and it really is it really is important to highlight, because the that pursuit of more like immortality is something that is grating on him because of the fact that he is tangling with the Black Rose, and he's literally killed off the Black Rose, and it's not dead. Like, because Swain, even though he's becoming unhinged, he's not an idiot. He is a very competent war leader in general, but he's got to find a way to deal with this threat that he already thought he dealt with. It's like, how many times have I got to kill this thing? Okay, if I got to kill this thing 1,000 times, then I got to figure out how to live 1,000 lifetimes.
That's too true. It's this interesting. It's an interesting part of the story, because not only do you have Borum, Darkwill, back at home losing his mind, you also have Swain out on these campaigns slowly losing his mind. So when you have all the powerful figures essentially losing their minds, it's not good for the people, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be good for your grunts. Like I'm sure I'll have to go listen to them again, but there's a couple of like these tracker quotes from when Riven was printed that that are just kind of like, I'm cold, my feet hurt, there's blisters on me, and like that's what these guys are in now. And on top of that, they're just looking at this guy that's just talking about birds. And while everyone's dying around him, and he's just I just want to go home. I'm sick of this.
So, Hetch alluded to it earlier. The invasion on Ionia is pretty much the straw that breaks the camel's back for Swain's psyche. During the battle of the Placidium, which we've talked about in the Irelia episode, Swain's he's depleted forces are trying their best, but they end up outmatched by a militia group that fell into their trap. So it's like, not only are they playing with a handicap in their favor, they still lost. So this battle actually left his complete army depleted, or navy, or whatever you want to consider them at this point. but it left him injured as well. He had a broken knee and a severed arm, which we know from his profile in game. And he was at death's door. And this is where the story starts to get a little more obscure, a little more ethereal. And I'll just make a comment about how it's written and presented. It's kind of confusing how they do a shift of viewpoint here, because the rest of the story, how it's told, is almost like a fever dream of events. So he is at death's door. A raven comes to, feast on his body. And he stares into the raven's eyes, kind of locks it in his gaze. The film goes to the black and white. And he starts to see these visions of like his parents, the black rose, the symbol of the black rose, Born Darkwill losing his mind, this concept of the darkness, the demon. And he's almost trying to conceal a power or keep a power that's within him concealed. Right, because he's fearful to let that free.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna take the benefit of the doubt here and say that like the confusing bits that we're diving into right now is written just to force you in the perspective of how unhinged Swain is at the point of when Irelia is walking around with his arm as a rallying flag to the militia. So it's like, maybe it's, you're supposed to feel like how crazy he's going, but this bit is kind of confusing because like we know from his portrait, and we know, especially after they did his rework, 1 in lore and 2 in the game of League of Legends, that he is exhibiting these demonic powers. So we have to assume that this is a point where this demon is possessing him, or this demon was always in him and taking control. Like, that's what we don't know. And but I'll take the gamble and say that they're trying to make you feel how unhinged he is.
Yeah, this would, side note, this would be a great an animated slice. If they want to take this bit and make a short thing for it to just for the fans, post it on their YouTube, I think it would do well. And it would also pique some interest because, like we said, Swain is very important to the whole Noxus story, and Noxus is important to every other story. But what we do get from this is he does survive. We don't get the in-between. We just get him back at the Noxian Empire. He's returned, but soon after he's cast out of the military for his failures. So, the Noxian military, they'll give you gifts, but they'll also take them away. They give it and take it away, right?
Yeah, and that goes to like our release episode where we talk about how cutthroat the politics are in Noxus, and the military is no different. Like, if you're not up to snuff as far as playing the game that the military is trying to play, much in the same way that politics are playing, they'll just go ahead and snuff you out, and they'll move on to the next strongest.
Exactly. And during this time when he's now casted out, he's becoming more and more obsessed with those ideals he essentially visualized at death's door in Ionia. And it's everything. Everything he's thought of is this concept of like the black heart of Noxus, the corruption of the Noxian Empire. And his goal now is to seek a way to resolve it. So we get the stretch of like many years where he's preparing slowly and in secret, and he still has a group of people who are loyal to him because of his prestige, and he ends up taking Noxus in one night, and he does so in a grandiose fashion to kind of say, hey, I'm here, these are the new ideals of Noxus, get ready, because we're swapping the whole plan. And he allows himself to be possessed by his power, this demon, which is what we get in game, which is what we see when he becomes that raven demonic being, that crossover monster that lashes out, and he destroys Darkwill on his throne, also while destroying the throne itself that he sat on. And this is to symbolize that change of ideals.
Yeah, and the change is much like we talked about in our LeBlanc episode, where it's a point moving forward that Noxus fights for Noxus. Like, it is no longer a nation that is built around the ruler. It's not built around the throne, and it's not built around these families that are playing games for the throne. Like, it is for the Noxian soldier. And If a fun thing now, take that thought, take that idea of every man having a place in Noxus, and then go rewatch the Runeterra short for when they introduced the Noxus region with Darius going in, like taking over a throne of a kingdom in Freljord, and then just go ahead and just like start having the Russian anthem playing behind you.
Hammer and sickle.
Hammer and sickle, like we're all equals now, brother. Let's go, comrade.
Yeah, so he then takes that, he puts his demonic power on display. He then follows up by establishing the Triferics, which is something we'll talk about at a later time because there's more details there. But what the major thing that the Triferic stands for is that no single ruler can be established, right? It's more of a council approach. And with the Triferics, he reverts all of Darkwill's military campaigns for seeking, immortality relics. And then he finally accepts the Black Rose, not so much accepting them as a personal ally, but accepting that their existence is outside of his control. But as long as their existence is in service of Noxus, then it's fine, even if that means going against him, right? And with that, he has his final focus of, it's not other nations anymore. He's done with invasions. He wants to understand the demon within him that possesses him. He wants to understand the dark heart of Noxus. And he says to do so, sacrifices will soon come. And it's all for the greater good of Noxus.
The greater good.
Yeah, one mad person for another. It's a hard swap to make, but this is fantasy. You got anything to say about that last bit before we hop in the card?
This is fantasy. Let's hop into it.
So we hop into the Swain card. The dumpy stamp of approval.
Boom.
Easy. He's a 5-cost 3/6 with fearsome, just like that dumpy.
Just like that dumpy, baby.
With Nexus Strike, deal 3 to the enemy Nexus. His level up is you've dealt 12 non-combat damage, and that's throughout the game. He doesn't have to see it, which makes him that much more valuable. Yeah, it's a powerful card. It's a good cost. Swain has always had a place in every meta to some degree because it's so like it's you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah. And it's also like the fact that he levels up off of non-combat damage, like he will always have a place just because for the most part, whenever we get to see meta shifts, he's always just so far outside of the meta that it's hard to build a balanced deck that works with the meta and works with Swain. Like, I can guarantee you the majority of decks that are built around Irelia, like if they run up against a Swain deck, it's going to be rough. Like you're going to have a good curve out to be able to play against it. And that's why that's why he's always going to be there.
Yeah. We get a little quote here on the first side of the card, which is a power beyond mortal understanding gave me the visions to see what most cannot. I peer through the darkness others fear. Sounds like a crazy person to me.
Just a little bit. But is he crazy or can we just not understand his greatness?
He's just so deep.
He's just so deep, man. Yeah, but that takes us to the flip side.
Yeah.
What's on the other side of the darkness, Swain?
So Swain is unique in that his front side is valuable throughout the game. His backside, yes, we're doing the double entendre with the dumpy, is a game ender, right? He's a 5-cost still, 4/7, so he gets that standard +1/+1 when he flips, still has fearsome, but now he has when you deal non-combat damage to the enemy Nexus, stun the strongest back row enemy, and then he has Nexus Strike, deal 3 to all enemies and the enemy Nexus.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is similar to Sejuani, if you listen to our Sejuani episode, where when she flips, it's very tough because the deck not only tries to enable her flip, but once she's flipped, it continues to enable the ability that's on the other side to end the game, which is a really neat way or neat approach to how they design those cards.
Yeah. And much like Sejuani, it's also a thing where this works like in a strategy where you're trying to protect the hero. So if you want to protect Swain, or in the case of Sejuani, you want to protect her, like as long as you get that damage onto the Nexus, their effect triggers, whether they're attacking or not. But it does reward you for throwing that sucker into combat. Because much like Sejuani, they both have the dumpies. So like if you're in a position where like, you know, you can go ahead and start swinging, they gotta deal with blocking Swain. Like that's not up for debate, because if you hit with Swain, all of a sudden Swain hit for 7 and he's wiping your board. Like it's whoo, oh boy.
And for, you know, the umpteenth time, if we haven't made it clear throughout this episode, the quote we get on this other side is, "No sacrifice is too great to see my vision for Noxus fulfilled."
Yep. The sacrifices will be made. At the very least, you know, since sacrifices are going to be made, he's walking around with this demonic, like, controlled blood gush of an arm now. Like, he's formed an arm just out of his stub. But it's the demonic power, but it's also blood red. So then, like, I could just see an artist depiction where it's just his blood just shooting out and forming an arm. And it's like, okay, Swain, hold back up. It ain't Halloween. Like, you ain't got to do all that much. But, you know, at least he's got
cosplaying.
Yeah, at least he's got like all this missing limb, and he's walking around with a cane, or like in the old days, he was walking around with a cane too, where it's just like, look, yeah, sacrifices must be made. Behold, my sacrifice. Like, I now want to have a tea party of Swain and Victor and just have them like bounce off of each other. Like,
the duo. The fun duo coming to CBS soon. Prime time.
Bring your kids.
So this takes us to the point of the episode where I usually have a challenge and or question for Hetch. Today I have a question. And, you know, with politics in the real world, unfortunately, sometimes you're left with choosing the lesser of two evils. So, Borum or Swain, which Mad King do you choose? And I go first. I tend to veer closer to Borum. And the reason I veer to Borum is because although, you know, he was seeking immortality, he was kind of spreading himself thin. You put yourself as a person who's not in power. You know that there's some Black Rose involvement, and they'll only let it go so far because they need Noxus to exist. So, and then you also have the chance with Borum for outside interference. Because he's spreading himself thin, some nation is going to come in and hopefully gut it all out, right? And be like, all right, Borum, you're out. But the Black Rose would obviously get their talons in and try to establish some kind of repertoire with that nation. I mean, either way, you're kind of screwed. But I think Borum, from the, hey, I'm just a civilian standpoint, makes the most sense because he's more of a puppet president than actually powerful himself.
I'm definitely the opposite. I would lean more towards Swain. Because I like the ideals that Swain talks about and preaches. They like, that's what you would want to believe in, is that, you know, like that's like the American dream. You go out there, like, as long as you bust your butt,
bootstraps,
you know, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you have a shot at life. But like the Swain's example within Noxus of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, we're all equal now, is also like a perfect story of showing how ultimate power corrupts ultimately. And yeah, he's built an entire empire now around the idea of fighting as equals, and it is to grow his demonic power to make sure that his vision of Noxus is the only Noxus. But it's like, yeah, like as someone, like if I had to pick a ruler, it would still be Swain, because then Spoilers for our very, very soon episodes. Like, you end up getting to follow under people like the brothers, like Draven and Darius. And Darius being someone that very much holds true to this ideal of fight for country, and like country will protect you. And like those, I would gladly follow Darius into battle. Like, once we get to really kind of break down his story, like, you know, that's the kind of man I could serve, and that's the kind of man that would be able to thrive in Swain's Noxus, even though it's an illusion of thriving, because only Swain would thrive. But hey, yeah, you know, it's the lesser of two evils to me, I guess.
And that's why these questions are always fun. I think I know just one kind of tangent off to, you know, obviously we're excited for the MOBA whenever that happens. And I hope that something we get story-wise, which would be a missed opportunity, is, you know, we haven't talked about Darius yet. We haven't talked about Draven at the time of this recording. But we started to talk about how the Triferix has created these different pockets of power, and how the ideals are sort of aligned, but different approaches, and the outside nation views on these and other regions as well. It'll be interesting to see, like, not so much a fall of Noxus, but more a civil war style of Noxus, because the story is kind of ripe for that, where it currently stands.
Yeah, like, it would definitely be a fun thing to do, because you could have like kind of do an MMO that would be your like
a
current
dungeon
timeline,
or like a campaign or a raid.
Yeah, like you would have like your current timeline, and then you could do like a whole event that would just be like playing through the civil strife of Swain taking over. And so then I could imagine doing like all these different side quests of just like, okay, like, hey, we got called out to Shurima because there's this artifact that's said to give you eternal life. So then you go fight in Shurima, and then while you're over there, you get to meet a guy that's like talking to an NPC that's just like, yeah, you should come join my ranks. Our leader's really good to us, Swain. We're going to Ionia. And then
That'd
it's
be
just
cool.
You get to play through that story just on these different side quests.
Yeah, I mean, like if you can't tell listeners, we're excited. We're waiting for the MMO. Just a hint, Ghostcrawler, please contact us.
Please
Contact us. Contact somebody. Necrit
is podcastcor@gmail.com. Like, you just shoot us an email, and like, you know, that way it's just between us at first, and then, because we just gotta know, we're losing our minds.
just a dash, please. A crumb. A crumb, please.
A crumb, please, sir. Please, sir, I want some MMO.
More. And with that, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Take care, everybody.